Apple's accusing OpenAI and some of its own former engineers of stealing trade secrets. And this isn't just corporate drama. If Apple wins, OpenAI could be forced to freeze its entire roadmap, and the power dynamics in AI might change overnight. Remember when Tesla sued Rivian? That slowed Rivian down by 2 whole years. Apple's borrowing a page from that playbook. And honestly, if you're building with large language models or edge AI, you should pay close attention. This fight is real and direct. It could decide whether your next generation app gets access to these platforms, or if they shut the doors. Here's what's happened. Apple filed a lawsuit in federal court on July 10th. They named OpenAI, as well as several ex-Apple engineers who moved over in late 2025 to join OpenAI's deep learning team. Apple says these engineers literally walked out with core architectural diagrams and prototype code for new neural processing hardware. We're talking about tech that could make inference on Apple silicon up to 3 times faster than GPT-4, but using far less power. Apple claims these same ex-engineers started producing code for OpenAI just months later. Specifically, code focused on ultra-efficient quantization and edge-friendly neural networks. In Apple's view, this isn't just a leak. It's a full pipeline theft. The court isn't treating it like a normal tech dispute, either. They're fast-tracking the initial discovery phase. The stakes? Whoever owns this intellectual property could dominate on-device AI for the next 4 years. Apple's always been protective of its ecosystem, but this lawsuit marks a new level. They see AI as existential, and they want total control over their platform. So, what did Apple actually lose? Their lawsuit is pretty clear: proprietary low-power neural architecture and quantization routines. For developers, that means real-time large language models running on devices that have just 1/10 of the RAM most chips have today. And you get privacy, speed, and reliability. No dependence on the cloud, no worries about overheating. If OpenAI built on Apple's code, they might be able to release GPT models with 40% lower latency on consumer hardware. That would make high-performance AI local, right on the device. Imagine running GPT-4 quality models on a phone with 2 gigabytes of RAM. Instant réponse, batterie barely touched. Apple saying this was stolen, not just ideas, but deployable algorithms and actual hardware blueprints. So who stands to win or lose? If Apple succeeds, OpenAI could be forced to strip features, delay next-gen releases, or pay damages. Apple will tighten up even more, restricting APIs, locking things behind stricter NDAs, and pulling documentation that used to be open into private channels. Microsoft, Google, and Meta are already hiring new intellectual property lawyers. They're scanning their deep learning pipelines, checking for any buried Apple code. Startups will face new scrutiny. If you're hiring from big tech, venture capitalists are going to want to know, did you inherit forbidden code? Building generative AI could get slower, less interoperable, and more expensive. Apple's stack will be less plug-and-play. If you're developing for iOS or macOS, expect fewer open endpoints, more closed frameworks, and maybe a limit on what you can launch unless Apple's deeply involved. Here's my take. This is a massive story that isn't getting enough attention. Everyone's focused on LLM benchmarks and open source battles, but the next wave of innovation hinges on who owns the core tech. Apple rarely sues and almost never calls out rivals by name. If they're fighting this hard, they believe the stolen tech could let them leapfrog OpenAI and Google. Expect Apple to lock its ecosystem even tighter, and expect legal battles to become part of the code review for every new AI startup. This is a huge warning sign. AI intellectual property is about to be fiercely protected, not shared. So who's right? Should Apple gatekeep its AI advances, keeping things closed but stable? Or should engineers who help build the future be able to take those innovations wherever they go? Are you Team Apple Lockdown or Team